Imagine an unsolved murder where police have just one suspect. No one else in the frame, just one man with a strong motive to kill. There is such a case in Victoria, and it needs a closer look.
When Kevin Pearce was gunned down in the dead of night, he knew who was after him.
He looked up and he said to her, "Darling, the bastard's got me."
The only suspect was committed to stand trial, but he still walks free today.
Mr. Matthews remains a person of interest.
Now, police are offering $1 million reward to help close the case.
This is a live police investigation. With your help, I believe the Pearce family can finally have the justice they deserve.
Detective Superintendent Deborah Wallace rose to the top of the New South Wales Police Force with grace, humour and an iconic sense of style.
The person that was shot is known to police.
In her incredible 37 years in the force,
Police search warrant!
Wallace took on murderers, drug suppliers and bikie gangs.
All cases can be solved. They're never cold. And you never give up.
I'm driving into the central Victorian city of Bendigo. Born in the boom times of the 19th century gold rush. It's a city with a rich architectural heritage. But that's not what I'm here to see. I'm bypassing the grand old buildings and heading straight to an industrial backlot. Bellevue Road Golden Square was the scene of a targeted shooting on the night of Monday, April 15, 1985. It happened just inside the door of this shed at number 30. Back then, the shed was used by McPhee Freight as a distribution depot. A truck driven by 45-year-old Kevin Pearce pulled up here late at night to pick up a delivery. But what he didn't know was that a sniper with a high-powered hunting rifle was hiding over the road. And when he got a clear shot at Kevin Pearce, he pulled the trigger.
Can you tell me what's your name and why you're here today?
Yeah, my name's Donna. I'm the second child of Kevin and Joan Pearce. Dad was murdered in 1985 and the case has never been solved.
The Pearce family moved to Bendigo when Donna was 6.
So can you tell me about your parents?
Yep, good people. Very loving. We had a really happy childhood. We always knew that Mum and Dad loved us dearly, all of us. Dad loved the footy, so we used to go to footy. He loved fishing. He loved racehorses. We used to go to the races together a lot. And he loved a beer. He'd go to the pub of a night time and come home fairly drunk sometimes. But he always was fun. He never ever got angry.
When Kevin and Joan bought a milk bar in Bendigo, it was very much a family business.
Us kids had to work before school and after school and on weekends. He worked hard, he paid us, so we were very, very lucky. We were always included. Mum and Dad made sure that we knew what was going on.
So a very, very close-knit family.
Very close family.
Ever the entrepreneur, Kevin started up a trucking business in 1982. Australia Post became his first client.
And Dad won 2 contracts, one to deliver the mail in Mildura and one to go around Echuca and Kahuna. And then when he had 2 contracts, he couldn't drive 2 trucks, so that's when the partnership was formed.
Kevin teamed up with Bill Matthews, who also had 2 mail runs, and Barry Coates, who didn't have any. And for a while, the partners really clicked. Kevin was great mates with Bill Matthews.
I remember him being at the house, remember him and Dad laughing and joking. They both loved racehorses, and I think that's what the connection was.
The good times didn't last. The partners soon found themselves in dispute, mainly about money. And they agreed to dissolve the partnership. By 1985, Kevin Pearce was back to being a sole trader.
Donna, thanks for coming with me today.
You're welcome.
Donna, who still lives in Bendigo, has agreed to retrace her father's steps on the night he was shot, starting from when he left the family home.
That night, you were at home, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I just returned home from a weekend away, so fairly tired. Said goodnight to Dad and went off to bed.
Kevin was on a tight schedule, leaving Bendigo late at night to deliver mail to Mildura, 400 kilometres away.
When your dad left, he wasn't on his own, was he?
No, Mum had decided to go to Mildura with him. It wasn't unusual. Mum would occasionally go up there with Dad.
But they didn't go straight to Mildura that night, did they?
No, so they had to go and load the truck with the mail, and Dad used to also take light freight, so they'd have to collect that before they left, yeah.
The first destination for Kevin and Joan was the Bendigo Mail Centre, just outside the CBD.
Our mail centre's just up here on the right-hand side.
Joan and Kevin arrived at the mail centre at about 11:30 p.m. Ordinarily, they would have met with another mail truck from Melbourne and taken delivery of the mail destined for Mildura. But the truck from Melbourne was running late.
So Mum said to him, just leave me here, I'll wait for Chris to come, you go around to McPhee's and grab the freight and come back and get me. Dad didn't want to leave Mum here. She said, no, I'm all good, I'll be right. She said, I'll be careful. Dad took off around to McPhee's, which is only a few minutes around the road.
To understand what happened next, I'm catching up with the detective who's leading the reinvestigation into the murder of Kevin Pearce.
My full name is Shadab Sherry. I'm a detective and I'm at the Homicide Squad, and we solely focus on unsolved homicide investigations.
Detective Sherry is looking closely at the events of April 15, 1985.
Kevin arrived at the McPhee Transport at about 11:45 p.m. to collect freight that was to be delivered to Mildura. Kevin arrived on his own. He's reversed his truck into the shed There's 3 other persons present in the depot at the time that worked there. They helped Kevin load the truck up.
Once the truck was loaded, Kevin had a short conversation with the manager of the depot, Paul Thompson. They were standing at the rear of Kevin's truck, just inside the entrance to the shed.
Paul's handed Kevin an envelope containing pay for the night, and according to Paul's statement, as he's turned around to walk away, he's heard a loud bang. He's turned around and he saw a flash of light, and he's seen Kevin fall to ground and started bleeding heavily.
Shot in his chest?
One single gunshot wound to the left side of his body.
And with no idea of where the gunshot came from, Paul Thompson rang the police, who in turn rang the ambulance. Meanwhile, back at the Bendigo Mail Centre, Joan Pearce heard the crack of the rifle coming from the direction of McPhee's. She was instantly concerned for her husband's safety.
Within a few minutes, the truck had arrived from Melbourne and Mum just said, take me around to Kev, take me around to Kev, I need to get to McPhee's.
Donna has agreed to come with me for a drive to Bellevue Road, Golden Square. It's not a McPhee's depot anymore, but the shed still stands on the exact spot where her father was shot.
So how did your mum describe the scene that night in 1985?
So when she arrived here, the police were already here and the ambulance was here. And they said, don't go down there, Joan. And she said, I've got to. And she put her elbows out and pushed her way forward and she ran down to Dad and she just leant down and gave him a kiss and said, oh, sweetie. The ambulance was working on him. They put him into the ambulance and Mum went in the ambulance to the hospital with Dad.
Kevin was treated at the Bendigo Hospital for several hours before being transferred to the Austin Hospital in Melbourne in a critical condition.
He didn't regain consciousness?
No, Dad was conscious. He was conscious for quite a few days, a number of days. I had a lot of trouble trying to knock him out. I remember saying to him at one stage, Dad, you need to have sleep, then you'll be stronger tomorrow, you'll be able to fight this. And he said, if I go to sleep, I'll never wake up. And he just knew. He just knew that that's what was going to happen.
When Kevin Pearce died of his injuries 3 weeks after being shot, the case was turned over to the Victorian Homicide Squad. It was now a murder investigation. But in the time between his shooting and his death, a team of detectives in Bendigo had uncovered some very interesting leads.
I'm sitting down with Bob Richards. In 1985, he was in charge of the Bendigo CIB.
What did you do as a lead investigator?
Well, Kevin Pearce had been removed before we got there by the ambulance. But our job is then to have a look at the scene and collect what evidence there is and preserve that so we can use it later in our investigation.
And I believe you did a search of the near vicinity.
It was dark at the time of the shooting, of course, because it was midnight. Following morning, about 7:15, we went out and searched the area opposite the transport depot because the staff at the depot had indicated to us at that time that the shots seemed to come from that direction. I found an area of the grass that had been flattened. It looked like someone was lying there.
In that same area, police found a spent shell from a powerful .308 calibre hunting rifle. They also found an open packet of cigarettes, suggesting a smoker may have been involved in the shooting. Curiously, there were no cigarette butts, just the open packet. Suspicion for the shooting very quickly fell on Kevin Pearce's former business partner, Bill Matthews.
Welcome, Andrew.
It's good to be here, Deb.
You've been covering this story for some time.
Yeah.
Crime reporter Andrew Rule has done a lot of digging into why Bill Matthews became the prime suspect in the murder of Kevin Pearce.
So tell me about Bill Matthews.
Bill Matthews is a slightly intriguing figure. He had long hair swept back in a ponytail. On description, he's the sort of guy that, might have been one of the older bouncers at a pub or might have ridden around on a Harley Davidson at weekends. He sort of had that look about him, a bit of a tough guy.
There appears to have been some hostility between Bill Matthews and Kevin Pearce.
That's true. Look, there's no doubt there's hostility. What we really don't know is the depth of it or the true reasons for it.
Hostilities between the two men came to a head over a fuel-sharing agreement they'd made during their partnership. They filled their trucks from the same petrol bowser at a fuel depot in town. After the partnership dissolved, they continued the practice, but now with separate accounts. Until Pearce accused Matthews of rorting the system.
Kevin Pearce claimed that Matthews had been stealing the shared fuel, and there was some talk that Matthews allegedly had the keys which allowed him access to the fuel tank, and Pearce said that Matthews had milked the tank for a lot of fuel worth a lot of money.
On the urging of his wife Joan, Kevin went to the police, who laid charges against Bill Matthews. That further inflamed hostilities between the two men. In fact, Kevin Pearce began telling friends and family he feared for his life.
He was scared for weeks, if not months, that something bad was going to happen. He was nervous, like physically nervous. There's a description of somebody slapping a fly with a fly swat or something and making a clap sound like that. And he jumped as if he'd heard a rifle shot because he was scared. To the extent that at a family function or barbecue held in Melbourne some weeks before the shooting, he talked to another attendee, a guy who was a policeman, who was off duty. And he said, look, I'm a bit scared, I think this bloke's after me. And the policeman said, oh, who's that? And he said, Matthews. He named him.
Dad was very concerned, and we were all told that, there'd been threats made against his life. Dad had been to the police and spoken to them, and they couldn't do anything because it was just hearsay. But he was a very frightened man for many months before that occurred. Sorry.
At the 1986 inquest into Kevin Pearce's murder, Kevin's wife Joan testified that Bill Matthews owed her husband $32,000 when he was killed. But Andrew Rule believes there might be more to the stolen fuel allegations.
It's conceivable to me, perhaps, that there's more of a backstory to the fuel issue. And maybe, for all we know, Billy Matthews felt justified because he might have been owed money by Kevin Pearce. Now, this is sheer speculation.
Evidence presented to the coroner not only covered all aspects of the feud, but there was also a suggestion that Bill Matthews had a second source of income in the 1980s.
It so happens that he was allegedly one of Bendigo's 2 active starting price bookmakers, SP bookmakers.
In the 80s, there were 3 ways to place a bet on the horses. With the government-owned TAB, with the on-course bookmakers, and illegally with an SP bookie.
Kevin Pearce was a pretty keen punter. He knocked around racing circles. He was betting fairly substantially for that era. If Bill Matthews was one of the 2 local SP bookies, there's every chance, it seems to me, that Pearce would be betting with him.
We asked Bob Richards, Bendigo's CIB chief in 1985, if he'd heard about Bill Matthews being an SP bookmaker. He hadn't. Donna Pearce confirmed the family's view that Bill Matthews owed Kevin Pearce money, not the other way round. She also said that before the shooting, Bill Matthews boasted around town that he was going to take the lucrative Mildura mail contract away from Kevin Pearce.
Donna, following your dad being shot, did he ever disclose to anybody who actually shot him?
Dad was aware that we all sort of knew that Bill Matthews was after him, but on the night that it occurred, Mum actually seen Dad injured on the ground, and when she got to him, he looked up and he said to her, "Darling, the bastard's got me." So he never named him, but we knew who it was, yeah.
Kevin's widow, Joan, didn't mention this detail in the statement she made to police after the shooting. Kevin Pearce was briefly spoken to by a policeman at Bendigo Hospital in the hours after the shooting. He was badly injured, but still conscious.
Kevin spoke to a detective, Terry Hopley, from the Bendigo CIB, who recounted their exchange. "Did you see who came in and shot you?" "No." "What did you see?" "Nothing." "Any idea who's done it?" "No." In the 1985 investigation into the murder of Kevin Pearce, police focused their attention on one main suspect, Bill Matthews. Kevin and Bill's business partnership had ended very badly, with accusations of theft, embezzlement, and threats to kill. However, there were 3 partners in the trucking business: Kevin Pearce, Bill Matthews, and Barry Coates.
Barry Coates was questioned by a news reporter on the 25th anniversary of the murder of his old friend Kevin Pearce.
Well, Kevin was a partner in the business with us, you know, and as far as I'm concerned, Kevin was a top bloke, you know. Kevin and I got on real well.
And was it a shock when you learned what happened?
Sure was, yeah.
But was it really such a shock?
It's my understanding that Barry Coates was also aware of the threats against Kevin Pearce.
It turns out that he told his own wife about these threats. He said, look, Matthews has threatened to shoot Kevin. We know that because she later told the police.
Now remember, after the shooting, police found a spent shell from a powerful .308 hunting rifle across the road from the McPhee's freight depot. 3 weeks later, Barry Coates received a visitor to his home. It was a female associate of Bill Matthews.
I'll reveal who that associate was a little bit later. The important thing now is to understand her message. She told Barry Coates to go and have a look in his backyard shed. There, he was told, he would find a powerful .308 hunting rifle and a box of ammunition.
He eventually found the rifle and some bullets. He thought that was the rifle used in the shooting.
Yeah.
He was told it was. The family then had a bit of a discussion of what they should do about that. One option was to go to the police and tell them. The other option was to get rid of it and stay quiet about it.
Out of fear of what would happen.
Yes. He was threatened by Matthews that if he said anything, he'd get the same treatment as Pearce.
An anxious Barry Coates and his wife drove 40 kilometres out of town to Lake Epilogue to dispose of the rifle by throwing it into the water.
Now, that's where it would have stayed, except for this. Their daughter, the Coates' daughter, Sharon Coates, is a party to these goings-on, and she tipped off the police. The police go and put the arm on Coates, who goes, "You got me, Gov," and he leads them to the Lake Epilogue, to the spot, and the divers go in and they retrieve a .308 rifle and a box of ammunition.
Convinced they'd just dredged up the murder weapon, police sent the rifle off to ballistics for analysis, where a big surprise lay in store.
Ballistics tested again, and there's no doubt that the rifle recovered was not the rifle that fired the bullet recovered out of Pearce's chest at the Austin Hospital.
And the detectives were just flummoxed because they were all, why is this? Why is he getting rid of a .308? Well, there's reasons. That particular gun had been stolen or went missing from a freight depot, would you believe, in Footscray, where Matthews had been loading up parcels. And so it makes sense that he had obtained it, or someone with him had obtained it, and therefore it would be a hot or stolen .308 and one he would not want to be found with. He had a good motive to ditch it.
There is no proof that Matthews hid the rifle, but it did throw suspicion for the murder away from him and on to Barry Coates.
Why me? It could be him as well.
That's right, yeah.
So have, in a way, two suspects, not just one.
Yeah.
But if Matthews was trying to take the spotlight off himself, it didn't work. the police presented a full brief of evidence to Victorian coroner Hal Hallenstein. His inquest also doubled as a committal hearing to establish Matthew's suitability to stand trial for the murder of Kevin Pearce.
I have here Hal Hallenstein's findings. My formal findings on this matter are that Kevin Hugh Pearce was shot by, or by the arrangement and organisation of, William James Matthews.
Bill Matthews was arrested and taken straight to jail from the coroner's court. But that's not where the story ends.
It wasn't actually enough for the DPP, the prosecutors, to run a criminal trial. They decided, although Matthews was committed for trial, it was withdrawn. And he wasn't acquitted, it was withdrawn.
The reason for that would be a lot of the evidence given at the inquest is the type of evidence like hearsay and opinion and rumours that the coroner can admit to an inquest that isn't admissible in a Supreme Court.
Bill Matthews walked straight out of jail and was back in Bendigo, a free man.
How did that make you feel?
Again, a very, very tough time. He arrived out the front of my shop waving to me. And I'm like, what is going on here? And we rang and they said, oh, haven't you seen the paper? The charges have been dropped at this stage. There's not enough evidence.
I'm visiting the Bendigo industrial estate where Kevin Pearce was shot in 1985. Remarkably, the old shed at number 30 is still here. It's just been rebranded. The most noticeable change is the mound of dirt and rocks across the road. That's where police believe the fatal shot was fired from.
When Bob Richards and his team of detectives first searched the area, the morning after the shooting, Kevin Pearce was still alive. He'd been transferred to Melbourne's Austin Hospital, where he lay for 3 weeks before succumbing to his injuries. It was only then that the homicide squad got involved. And when they came to Bendigo, they found new evidence.
They find some cigarette butts. And I think these were John Player Specials, which weren't the most common brand.
Now, I've asked Bob Richards about these cigarette butts, and he maintains they weren't there the day after the shooting. His team only found a spent shell and an open packet of John Player cigarettes. So now we have 3 butts as well. Who smoked John Player cigarettes?
Police established that Billy Matthews had given up smoking. Now, that's an interesting thing in itself. When did he give up smoking, and how would you prove it?
Police took Matthews at his word, and in 1985, they were unable to confirm the identity of the smoker because DNA technology was not available.
These cigarettes that were picked up by the homicide squad were saved and kept in sealed containers for many years, 18 years. And then they were tested with the new technology of DNA testing, and that proved that they had been smoked not by Billy Matthews, but by one of the many women that Matthews was associated with, a woman called Diane Robertson.
In 1985, Bill Matthews had a complicated private life.
He had a wife called Mary with 3 children. He'd left her to take up with a woman called Karen Strawhorn, who had a baby in this year that we're talking about, 1985. He was also conducting parallel an affair with a woman called Diane Robertson.
Matthews maintained the relationship with his girlfriend until 1994. In fact, they had 2 children together. But it was only in 2003 that police identified the cigarette butts they'd collected at the crime scene belonged to Diane Robertson.
Does it put Diane at the scene?
Did she do the shooting? Well, probably not. Was she lying down beside Matthews while he did the shooting? Or beside some other person? Well, maybe.
So what did Diane Robertson tell police about her movements on the night of the shooting? And what did Matthews say about his movements?
I certainly haven't spoken to Mr. Matthews as yet. And Mr. Matthews remains a person of interest.
Back in 1985, Bill Matthews and Diane Robertson said they were at Matthews Truck Depot when Kevin Pearce was shot at the McPhee Depot. It's a 2-minute drive between the 2 depots. So could Matthews and or Robertson have driven around to Bellevue Road to take a shot at Kevin Pearce?
Someone heard a car speed away, high-pitched revving. Someone saw a small yellow car speeding off. It so happens that Diane Robertson, Bill Matthews' girlfriend, had a small yellow car.
Interestingly, 2 other transport workers were employed by Bill Matthews at his depot that night. But they left to go to the Bendigo mail centre just before Kevin Pearce was shot at the McPhee depot. That left Bill Matthews and Diane Robertson without an alibi. A situation compounded in 2003 when police traced the John Player cigarette butts at the crime scene back to Robertson. My understanding is she's retracted her original alibi statement, but still doesn't say where she was or where Bill Matthews was on the night.
She's retracted that. All these things point towards her and him.
Now remember the .308 hunting rifle that was recovered by police divers in Lake Epilogue? That rifle was thrown in the lake by Barry Coates after it was allegedly planted in his Bendigo backyard. Coates found out about the rifle from an associate of Bill Matthews.
I can now reveal who that associate of Bill Matthews was. It was none other than Diane Robertson, Bill's secret girlfriend. She called in on Barry Coates 3 days after Kevin Pearce died of his injuries in hospital. Diane Robertson was believed to be acting under instruction from Bill Matthews. Have you any thoughts of why she may have alerted the Coateses as to the fact that there's a gun on their property?
Look, as an investigator, you can't form theories without speaking to people. I certainly haven't spoken to Diane yet.
Diane Robertson broke off her relationship with Bill Matthews back in the 1990s. She's since changed her name, moved to Queensland and remarried.
And I believe that in recent times that the police have sent 2 officers interstate to speak to Diane Robertson and really say, look, you've got the key to this, do the right thing.
Are you aware of what the outcome was of those attempts?
I'm not aware at this point, but I hope that it planted the seed. As Bill Matthews gets older and less intimidating, in his late 70s, perhaps she might see a way clear to reveal what she does know.
Bill Matthews only spoke to police once, and that was the day after the shooting in 1985. He was asked his opinion of Kevin Pearce, to which he responded, "Personally, I think he's an arrogant fat and he doesn't want to work." When asked about the shooting, Bill Matthews said, "I don't know anything about it, mate." It's been 37 years since Kevin Pearce was brutally gunned down in the regional Victorian city of Bendigo. But his murder remains unsolved. To help get some clarity around this case, I'm calling in retired New South Wales detective Wayne Hayes.
It seems like a really cold and calculated hit, for want of a better word.
Oh, very much so. You've got the man going about his business. It's relatively late at night. If you put it all together, you look at who could possibly be involved, and the obvious suspect is Matthews. No doubt from what I read that the animosity was quite palpable between them. So he has a motive.
I want to talk to Wayne about the coroner's inquest of 1986, where Bill Matthews and Diane Robertson both refused to give evidence.
What do you make of that?
Well, the coroner's court is a very different court to the normal court. People can say what they like in the coroner's court and not get into trouble for it, with the exception of self-incrimination. Okay, if I got in there and said I killed him, then oops, that's a problem for me. So people are allowed to use the Americanism to take the fifth, that is, they have a right to silence. I personally would view it as an investigator as something like, ding, why aren't they giving evidence? Not that they're the murderers per se, but they have something to hide or something that's valuable to my investigation.
Coroner Hal Hallenstein was definite when he handed down his findings that Kevin Pearce was shot by Bill Matthews or by the arrangement and organisation of Bill Matthews. Let's consider that finding in the context of where police believe the bullet was fired from. 44 metres away across the road. It's a remarkable shot by anyone's estimation.
So it could even lend itself to someone being almost a professional marksman, for want of a better word.
Yep, perhaps. Yep.
As part of the investigation, Victoria Police are reviewing the evidence in relation to where the shot was fired. That's because even an experienced marksman would have difficulty shooting a target in the dark from a distance of 44 metres.
In my experience, it would be. Yes, it'll be a very hard shot to take. That's an active line of inquiry. The location of the shot, the direction from which the shot came from, that's still under review.
On the night of the shooting, there were 3 workers in the depot. But when police questioned them, they were not forthcoming.
Well, that was a problem right from the start, that even the people working at the depot were very reluctant to cooperate.
Did the workers fear reprisals from Bill Matthews if they told the truth? Bob Richards is in no doubt.
If they were standing there right next to him when he did it, they wouldn't say.
When Kevin Pearce was gunned down, he was about to hit the road on the mail run to Mildura, 400 kilometres away on the Murray River, which leads to another theory.
The intriguing thing about this is that Mildura, since early 70s, has been one of those irrigation areas in Australia, like Griffith and like Shepparton, where it's been the perfect place to grow marijuana.
The criminal organisation most commonly associated with the drug trade in Griffith and Mildura is the Calabrian Mafia.
They needed supply lines to send this illegal product to market. And a mail truck strikes me as a very, very good way to do it.
Did the Mafia order a hit on Kevin Pearce?
Kevin Pearce often spoke against drugs to his daughters. Perhaps he had refused to bend his principles to run the dope up and down the road, and perhaps he was being lent on. Maybe it push came to shove on that.
Police searched Kevin Pearce's truck and Bill Matthews' truck after the shooting, looking for evidence of drugs. They found nothing. There are many questions that remain unanswered over the murder of Kevin Pearce. When he arrived at the McPhee depot that fateful night in 1985, he felt in his heart that he was on borrowed time. And he was right.
We've tried contacting the workers who were in the depot on the night of the shooting. But sadly, nearly 40 years on, some have passed away and others have proved hard to find. And Kevin's former partner, Barry Coates, he's not talking either. There's really only one more person left to ask about this crime, and that's Bill Matthews.
Bill Matthews still lives in the area. His LinkedIn page says he's a director at Delta Freight Lines. However, our investigations revealed the company was deregistered in late 2020. Another business, unrelated to Delta Freight, now operates from the same address in Bendigo. When we rang Bill Matthews to inquire about doing an interview, he was behind the wheel of a truck, still working at the age of 76. He said he had nothing to do with Kevin Pearce's murder, and he'd checked with his lawyer about the interview. When we followed up, Matthews declined to talk to us further on the advice of his lawyer. We make no allegations against Bill Matthews.
Victoria Police is offering $1 million rewards in a bid to crack 8 unsolved murders. Police say they have suspects in most of the cases, but need more evidence to charge them.
In 2015, police offered a $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Kevin Pearce's killer as part of a broader cold case campaign.
In all of these, the lives of victims have been taken prematurely, unexpectedly, with extreme violence and, importantly, without any explanation.
Murder is a secret that's very hard to keep. There's someone out there that knows who killed Kevin and why. And look, the $1 million might be the incentive that these people need to come forward.
There has been one significant development, and that is the location of some cigarette butts, which have been DNA identified to a known person. That person really should come forward and explain why those cigarette butts with their DNA on it. It's vital for a number of reasons.
Anyone who knows anything about this should really have a look in the mirror, look into the eyes of the person they're looking at and just ask themselves, what am I? I know all this information and I'm the one that's stopping this matter coming to a closure.
The unsolved murder of Kevin Pearce has cast a shadow over Bendigo since 1985. A breakthrough in the police investigation is about the only thing that will heal those still gripped by fear.
What impact has that had on your family?
Had a huge impact on our family. Dad wasn't there to see who I decided to marry. He wasn't there to wish me all my best on my 21st or any other birthday. He wasn't there to meet my kids and play with them. They know their grandpa as a photo, and that's all they know of him.
Kevin's widow, Joan, is still traumatised to this day by her husband's execution.
I saw Joan Pearce a couple of years ago at a dance. I was selling tickets. The dance was being raised for a local golf club. But as I sold her the ticket, she said it was so many years, days, since Kevin was shot, right off the top of her head. And she has lived with that stress and trauma and grief every day. Yeah.
And a husband taken from her,
Yeah.
going out to work in the middle of the night, earning
a
hard
living, doing his work. Yes.
Kevin was laid to rest in the town of Hamilton, where the Pearce family lived before moving to Bendigo in the 70s.
How does it feel like to be here, at the scene of the crime, nearly 40 years later?
Very anxious to be here, as you can imagine. It's gut-wrenching, actually. Yeah, it's just gut-wrenching. My mum deserves answers, and someone should be made accountable.
Donna, I know this hasn't been easy for you today.
No, a tough gig.
So
yeah,
I really appreciate
thank you.
You sharing your thoughts with me.
And I thank you for your time, and if anyone has any information, please come forward and let the police know, please, so that we don't have to go through this again. Thank you.